Welcome to the Nonprofit Exchange Podcast. Stories by leaders for leaders to help you raise the bar on your own excellence, to release the potential inside of you. Now, here's today's podcast. Welcome to the Nonprofit Exchange. It's Hugh Ballou, and we're talking today about how to set up a nonprofit. And, you know, if you've already got a nonprofit set up, maybe there's some things that you overlooked or maybe things you didn't know about that you'll need to know about today. So get a notepad, because this is one that you're going to want to take notes. I know that my guest today has a wealth of information, and he's got an enterprise to help you get started. So Christian LeFer, welcome to the Nonprofit Exchange. Please tell people a little bit about yourself, and then tell them why you're doing this great thing you're doing.
Absolutely. Thanks, Hugh. Great to be here again. And, you know, years ago when I was young, my younger sister was born about 5 years after me. I was 5 when she came along. And she was developmentally disabled, we found, as she got into her 3rd and 4th year of life. And usually kids are talking up a storm at that point. And there was no apparent issues with her, but it turns out that she had this developmental issue. And so I got familiar at a very young age with different nonprofits. I didn't know they were nonprofits then, but things like Special Olympics that she's competed in her whole life, etc. And several years back, fast forward many years, I volunteered to start a 501c3 with some friends for a project, and I quickly became morally outraged at how difficult it was and how long it would take to get the approval. So I set about solving that for not only myself, but many other people. And we've done nearly 3,000 501c3s for organizations operating all over the world at this point through instantnonprofit.com.
Instantnonprofit.com. That's a web address we want to put into this podcast and let people know about that. Because you're right, people don't know where to go. They don't know what to do. You have the steps to help people get started. I have, through Centervision, we offer what we call a solution map. You know, where is it they want to be and how they create the infrastructure. So the people part of this, people know how to use their skills, how to be engaged. And then the funders know why they need to fund you, because they want to fund impact. They don't want to fund activity. And for us to look at that whole continuum of who do you need leaders, who do you need board, who do you need funders, who do you need whatever, and then what will they do together. But the first thing is to be able to set it up and set it up right. So let me ask you, let's take a reverse look at this as we're starting up. By the way, if you have any way to turn up your mic, it's a little bit low. And I know people want to hear every single word that you say, because in the many conversations we've had, I'm constantly amazed at the depth of your knowledge and the completeness of your systems that make it really easier for people to do what they want to do. They get it done and then go and do the work. So let's say, what are the top 3 or 4 things that people do wrong when they set up a nonprofit?
I would say top 3 things that people do wrong when they start their nonprofit. We often people come to us where they form the wrong kind of entity. People say, well, I've started an LLC and, I need you to help me get tax exempt status. And so we prefer that people come to us with nothing, because then we have chain of custody of all of the documentation and that we know things are done correctly. The entity formation piece is also, even if you do create the nonprofit corporation, which is the proper type of entity, often people miss a step where they do not add the purpose and dissolution clause language that maybe the state doesn't ask you for. They will give you the nonprofit corporation, no problem. Later on, though, when you go to file with the IRS, if you don't have the proper language in those articles, you'll get rejected, and that'll cause a huge delay. You have to go back to the state and amend, et cetera. So that would be number one, would just be they make mistakes in the formation of the entity. Number two would be there are many. I wrote a whole book about this ebook. There are all kinds of mistakes that you can make in getting tax exempt status. When you apply to the IRS, there are certain things that you cannot do with your nonprofit and certain things that you have to have prepared. And if you miss any of, I believe it's about 26 isolated steps in filing for the tax exempt part of it. So you've gotten the entity going, you have the nonprofit corporation. But if you do not complete the tax exempt application correctly, you get rejected for that piece of it. And then I would say the third mistake that people make when starting their nonprofit is overcomplicating things for themselves. Trying to put all of the pieces in place all at once instead of taking the necessary steps and then moving on to the next piece of the process, because it can be overwhelming. I think the biggest problem that people have is never getting started because of perfecting too much of the process to begin with and not knowing which the critical pieces to start with and how to step it out properly.
Yeah, I find that it's overwhelming often when we're doing something it can be pretty large, not knowing where to start, not knowing what to do next. So it's pretty complex. And what I know about you is you're able to give people a step-by-step process. So let's start thinking about there's some prerequisites. I always encourage people when they say they're going to set up a nonprofit is to look at what's already available. And I know that half of the nonprofits set up each year close because they might find themselves redundant, or they try to do the work and they're in a oversaturated market, or they just don't have. There's lots of reasons they close. But one of the things I don't think they do well is to look at the competition, see who's out there, and see if what you want to do is already being provided for. What is your sense of that?
Well, I'm not, I can't say I've run into that a lot. And the reason is, well, it's kind of like, people say, well, aren't there already too many nonprofits? And yes, many nonprofits do close. I don't know that that's because there is saturation. I think what happens is just like many small businesses close, they don't have the systems set up to maintain themselves in good standing, to bring the money in that they need, and they get burnt out as founders and as small business owners often do as well. And sometimes they get burnt out when they're 3 feet from gold. They just don't have all of the things put together, and they take on too many different things. There's always a mentor that I had told me once, there are about 50 things that you need to do to start any serious venture, whether it's a nonprofit or a small business or a major project. You only need to do the top 3 at any given time. And if you try to do the top 10, you will fail. So it's about staying focused on the right things. But so many nonprofits are serving a unique need in a unique way that the founder sees as necessary, and they operate at a local or county level in a neighborhood or with a very small niche of people that no one else is quite going to serve in the same way. So many nonprofits, it's just the traction that they lack, and not necessarily that there's not a need or that they're redundant.
So it really, so also, yes, why does the community need you? And what is it that you're going to do that's unique to solve the problem? We exist because we solve a problem, really. And we bring a solution to it, and it's a unique solution that we can offer. So when people come to you to start up a nonprofit, what do you wish they had? Or do you have a way to get that information from people?
Yeah, we guide them in that. We step this process out so that even inside the 501c3 formation and tax exempt status process, they don't need to think about too many things at once. So we've created a very simple 3-step process where in step 1, they sign up on our site, choose the right package because there are a couple of different paths to 501c3, and they immediately get a welcome email with a link and a very short form. All they have to do is fill out that form and have the 3 things you need in there, which is the name of the organization, 3 board members, and a very basic mission statement. We actually give them a formula for the mission statement too. It's not the mission statement they want to put up on Times Square in lights. It's the mission statement that's going to get them through the government approval process. And so by just giving them those 3 very simple things to start out, they don't need to worry about all of the detail that will come after or the long list of documents that we'll provide, et cetera. We're going to provide everything they need, every document, every policy, but all they have to do is worry about the next couple of steps. And so those 3 ingredients are what we ask them to bring to the table when they sign up with us, when they start.
Give us a sense for what kind of documents you're talking about in order to be able to, I know there's bylaws and there's articles and conflict of interest. So what are the necessary documents that one will have to be successful in launching?
Absolutely. The typical ones that are brought up are conflict of interest policy, compensation policy, bylaws, and then of course there are elements of the application itself. But so those 3 that I just mentioned, the conflict of interest, compensation policy, and bylaws, are 3 core essential documents the IRS is going to want you to have, right? They're required. There are another set of documents that I won't get into in detail here. We provide a corporate governance package as well, and that provides things like fill in the blanks, editable minutes for your organizational meetings, your board meetings, board resolutions. You want to have a template for that, and we provide all of that, mostly pre-written, especially for that first board meeting where you need to authorize. And then things like the board recruitment form, so that when you ask someone to join your board and they say, yes, what does that entail? Most people stutter after the yes, not before. And so being able to answer that in a 1-page document about what you're asking the board member to do is something that our customers really have an advantage with. So those are the typical types of documents that are concerned and that we solve.
I'm going to let my colleague Russell weigh in on some of this. We're just beginning to scratch the surface of what it takes and why we need these documents. So, hello, Russell.
Greetings, greetings. I was late returning from a meeting, a very good one. It's good to see you again, Christian. It's been quite a while. And starting an organization and getting it started the right way is really critical. And so there are so many different steps that can really trip a person up. But having a system where you can just focus on one piece at a time, then the next thing, then the next thing, and making sure you can cross all your T's and dot all your I's is very important. So, and there's so many things that people can typically overlook. And how frequent would you say it occurs, Christian, that when people are using a pen and ink system or not doing an automated type of system, how frequently do people tend to miss some steps, and what does that do to the timing of the application with IRS?
It's hard to say with any reliability, how frequently people miss steps. But really what we're talking about is how do we reduce the obscenely long time that even a properly completed 501c3 application takes, right? So the IRS, if the budget is about $50,000 per year projected, in the first 3 years. And we have people that fall on both sides of that line. It gets immensely more complicated. And so I think part of the reason that the IRS's average approval time is 12 to 14 months is because outside of absolute mistakes and just errors, omissions, major problems like that, it's very difficult to format the information that is needed and is requested by the IRS, or even to know what they're requesting. So it's as much to me a mistake of putting not enough information or too much information, so that it's not a mistake, but it's a deficit from what would be considered an ideal file. That is why the IRS's average takes so long. The IRS has made their own problem. They've made the whole process so complicated that people don't know what to give them and end up either mailing them an encyclopedia or omitting other things that are actually needed, causing a back and forth with the IRS agent. And it's kind of like the mortgage that just never closes because the underwriter just wants that one more document and then one more and one more. So we've created a process whereby we create something we call the love letter to a bureaucrat. It is the ideal perfect file that has not too much information, not too little, kind of like the Goldilocks file, and also very systematically presents that information like you would see in a well-organized book, table of contents, separator cheat sheets that are like chapters. And so when that person opens that file at the IRS, they know exactly what they're going to get and exactly where to find it, and they can check all the boxes and punch out to lunch early, which is what every desk worker wants to do.
What you have, it's almost like an automated audit technique guide. Now, the IRS publishes audit technique guides, and most people don't know this, but what that does is it outlines the typical procedures for an entity of a specific type that a revenue agent would actually take in doing an examination. So it's kind of step by step, and when you know how to put information together in a way that the service looks at it, you can get that auditor out of your office the same way. But you've created something that's automated that it's not for an audit, but for application purposes. Just when you make it easy for them to do their jobs, things are so much faster, so much smoother. And you've done tons of these. What's been your typical turnaround rate for an average application on these?
So I would say the average large format, what we call the enterprise, larger budget type organization, if the average is at the IRS is 12 to 14 months, we tell people 3 to 6 months. And so our target is always to cut down that delay time by about 2/3. Of course, this is the IRS. We're not in control. That is our average. And so people are really thrilled. Matter of fact, the IRS, they recently put a policy in place. You're not allowed to call to request any information on your pending file within 180 days. They will refuse the call, and they send you a letter now that says that. Don't bother us for 130. Well, the good news is we're getting word back that the file is approved prior to that in most cases. So it's better to have the only news you get be good news on that front. But we're saving an average of 7 to 9 months in that case. For the smaller budget organizations, which are the majority of charities filed in the U.S. and the majority that we do, end to end, 7 to 8 weeks, you'll have an approval in your hands. And right now, people who are about to sign up, we're encouraging them to stop thinking about it and start taking action and go ahead and sign up with us, because we want to get that file in prior to the holidays. Get it incorporated at the state level before Thanksgiving, and we want to get the IRS application in well before Christmas so that they can have that fourth quarter, they can take advantage of that fourth quarter fundraising opportunity that we all about, most nonprofits raise more in the fourth quarter than they do the whole rest of the year.
Yes, Giving Tuesday is coming. I've got a couple of campaigns to work on. So, yeah. So, as a group, are you finding that you have larger entities or smaller entities approaching you? And I know that you start, but you do a number of other different things beside actually filing those applications. So, are you finding organizations of all sizes approaching you, or does it vary?
Absolutely, it runs the gamut. We just got off the phone with someone in Europe who's very well connected to celebrities, and they're doing a large environmentally oriented nonprofit. They'll crowdfund and they'll bring in some big donors and some few dollars times a million people through social media, so that their funding sources will be all over the place and they'll raise millions, certainly. And then we have a nice woman that I spoke with in the state of Washington, and she helps get animals rehomed who are either stray or have been abused, etc. And she needs this status so that she can continue to get donated veterinary care, dog food, etc. by the Walmart or the various supermarkets in her area. And they don't want to give those services to her without her having 501c3 status. She probably won't raise $5,000 in a year, but she gets significant in-kind donations to help these animals. So it really all shapes and sizes.
You mentioned in-kind donations, and that's pretty important, and that's actually a revenue source. In-kind donations, pro bono work. How many people that you speak with have considered that?
It really depends on the type of nonprofit. I think there's a lot of in-kind with, there's more with social services, right? So people who are feeding people, clothing people, etc., where goods can come in handy. And then animal-related nonprofits. Nonprofits that don't have those kinds of focus where they're provisioning people or animals tend to do with hard cash or online donations. So
Christian, the average nonprofit, it varies, but somewhere around 70% is the income that keeps them open from donors. And we teach there's 8 different streams. So how do you prepare people for getting funded, and when can they start taking money in?
They get to start taking money in as soon as they're incorporated. Because the IRS's official policy is to backdate the date of tax-exempt status back to the date of incorporation. When they get that letter from the IRS, at the top is going to have today's date. And then in the letter mentioned as the date of tax-exempt status is going to be the date of their incorporation, as long as they incorporate within 27 months, which most people do. As long as they get tax-exempt status within 27 months of incorporation. So that's such an outlier, I usually don't even mention that. We provide a memo to our customers to replace the IRS letter in lieu of the IRS letter until they get that letter, explaining and quoting the IRS's actual policy of backdating. So that's why we immediately incorporate for our customers so that they can open a bank account immediately with the EIN and the articles. They can open a bank account right away and start collecting tax-deductible funds. And if anyone asks, how am I going to write this off if you don't have your IRS yet? They provide this memo.
That's a good tool to have in your toolkit, especially as they're trying to collect donations.
Yeah, that's so important at the beginning.
Yeah. So it kind of solves the problem of coming up with a fiscal agency arrangement, which can be it can be challenging if there's a misalignment. If you've got somebody that's aligned, it's fine, but it's complicated. It can take some time. Not knowing how long the application is going to take and having it take place quickly can also create some issues too.
The customer from Europe today, who is, starting at we do American, just to be clear, US based 501. This person happened to be in Europe and is working with celebrities across LA and Hollywood, and asked about fiscal sponsorship. But when he found out how much time delay that we eliminate on the IRS approval side, he realized that it's probably not going to be necessary to go to the trouble of getting a fiscal sponsor. And when you have money going through anyone, the United Way or any fiscal sponsor, they're usually going to take a percentage, 5 to 10% right off the top. It's also going to delay you getting those funds. And like you said, if there's a misalignment in purpose, or just asking the donor to write a check to somebody else's organization can cause a misalignment of trust. And so it's best to say, this is what I'm doing, this is what I presented to you, and this is the organization that we're going to write that.
Yeah, we can behave better and be more efficient if we're in a culture where everybody trusts everybody.
That's very true.
There's also the opportunity to introduce confusion into an already confusing process when you're talking about regulatory compliance, and there's enough to do with bringing people on board and getting everything aligned. The technical aspects can be very daunting.
Absolutely. Yeah, you want to have as frictionless a process as possible, especially when donors are involved. They want it to be no brain damage and no trouble to write that check, and you want that too.
So Christian, say if I want to start a nonprofit, which I don't, I already have one, but say I came out of the audience where you were speaking and said, oh, I need you to help me start a nonprofit. What are the things that people have to pull together? I know they really need to have the 3 board members, at least 3 to start this thing. And there's no too early to start getting people's commitments.
Absolutely. So the way we do it is most of the people who come to us do have those 3 board members. But if they do not, since most states take some time, 2 to 3 days to even 2 to 3 weeks, depending on what state you're dealing with, there is some leeway where they can start as a single incorporator with us. Most states, except Nevada, and I don't know if there's another one, only need a single incorporator to start. So what we do is we go ahead and incorporate in that state with that individual. And then we allow them that intervening time to go out and get the other 2 board members. But they need the board members. They need a basic mission statement. As I said, we provide the formula, especially for the smaller organizations, a very simple formula to come up with your mission statement. And it's basically we provide or we do X, right? We provide X, some fill in the blank, a product or service that helps people to a specific group. So you fill in that blank so that they can get and then fill in the blank for the outcome. So for example, our mission with this company, and we are a for-profit, but we certainly help a lot of nonprofits, and we have a nonprofit alongside of this company. We help would-be nonprofit founders, right? People who desire to start a nonprofit by providing a seamless end-to-end done-for-you service so that they can get their nonprofit off the ground while staying focused on their mission. So that's where I use that 3-step mission formula.
That's really hard for entrepreneurs to chase the shiny object syndrome, isn't it?
It is. They want to write something very big and elaborate, and they're welcome to do that, but we really help them dial it back to 140 characters or close to it. So they need 3 board members. They need a mission statement. And if they're a larger organization, there's a second set of steps where we get granular about the activities and how they're going to conduct the activities, where they're going to do it, how they're going to fund it, etc. Smaller organizations don't really need to get into as much detail and provide a budget. Larger organizations do. But we have a systematic formula and a formula-driven spreadsheet, for example, that takes what the IRS doesn't really communicate in English, and we translate it into English so that it's very simple, and then we put it into the format that the IRS wants for the customer. And that's how we get these great results.
You know, building a budget is something that's very challenging, especially in the initial one. So as people go in and they build this budget, are these tools they can keep using to handle their budgets?
Yes. So what we've done with our tool is we've provided what looks more like a normal budget for them to plug numbers into.
Okay.
And then we have an uneditable tab that spits and aggregates all of those numbers into a format that the IRS likes for the application. But what ends up happening is the customer walks away with an asset for them because they have what they bill as a budget when often they don't have that prepared yet. And it gets those juices flowing. How much money do we need to raise to make this happen? And where will that money go? And if they need some guidelines, we have that for them as well. Where how much, doing our employee benefits sometimes comes up. And typically you don't want to spend more than certain amounts on fundraising activities, for example, because people start to wonder if you're going to do any good when you're spending too much.
Russell, I heard him mention some ebooks a minute ago, just kind of slipped that by. You think we should explore that with him? He's got some how-to guides. What do you think?
Oh yeah, how-to guides are great. You know, it's simple tools that explain how to do things, and it just takes some of the sting out of it and gives people manageable steps. Because if something's not easy to access, understand, or use, people are just it's gonna collect dust. So tell me a little bit about some of these guides that you've written. These are new, yes?
Yeah, so we have a new resources page. So if you go to instantnonprofit.com/nonprofit-resources, and actually, let me make sure that that's the right link. But if you just go to instantnonprofit.com and click resources at the top of that page, we have 20 downloadable resources that people can pull onto their own computer, edit for their own use, etc. For such things as how to run a board meeting in 30 minutes or less, or how to, what's a conflict of interest policy look like, and many other downloads that they can get the various resources. We also have on our blog, if you go to the website and go to the blog, we have a 25,000 word set of posts that correspond and match that, augment that resource page, where we've written about 25 posts, all of the different steps somebody would start a nonprofit. Now, of course, often people, and you can get that in a PDF as well, because you mentioned an ebook. And that's a 72-page ebook that's available on our site. If you go to that blog post, which is right at, it's pinned at the top of our blog.
Okay. Yeah.
So we'll,
I don't think you could find this exact mix of all these documents and how-tos in any one place. That's what I remember last time we talked, Christian, is you've thought through all of the component parts that people don't even know, and they get part of it done, then they don't know where to go for the rest of it. So
Right.
Sounds like you've got hundreds of documents, and this is a whole lot of work. Set me straight here.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why, we have a fairly open-handed manner of providing people information at the level that they want it. If someone wants to try to figure this out on their own, or they're missing, a conflict of interest policy or something, go ahead and download that. But what people often find is after going through 72 pages of posts on all the different elements of starting a nonprofit, where they realize that assembling all of these different individual resources is a major job in itself, and that they would probably be better off spending that time with a life skill, right? Because you're only going to form a nonprofit once in your life, maybe a couple of times. So why become an expert in that when you could invest that same time and pain and learning curve into something like fundraising, or studying a huge course on bringing 8 streams of revenue into your nonprofit? That's a life skill that will pay off forever. So what we present to people is the option of having us do the 501c3 formation for you, putting all these resources together for you, and you're able to go focus on the mission and delivering the food to the children, or the literacy, or raising your consciousness, or helping the environment, whatever it is. That's your unique gift. Filing papers is not your unique gift. That's why we exist.
Yeah, it's a marvelous set of tools. There's a lot of things in there. And so, yes, spending the time to create strategies. That's what we work with people to do: strategies, fundraising, all of the things that are involved in delivering the service, keeping the organization on track. And you have tools to help people stay on track once they form, don't you?
Absolutely. We have something called hands-free 501c3. And what we do there is we file your annual 990N, provide your annual report, and your charitable solicitation registration, which are three minimum requirements to keep the organization in good standing year over year as you go forward. Because that compliance is essential. You don't want to lose your tax exempt status, as over 200,000 organizations did in around 2011. And consistently, organizations lose their status every single year by the tens of thousands because they fail to maintain those documents. So why worry about that going on when you're trying to sit down with a donor who's probably asking you how your corporate governance is and your compliance is going, when you can just have a turnkey solution. So we do provide that as well. And then if people need to register nationwide, they're raising money in all states, we can help with that as well. Because if you're raising money in every state in the country, or any number of them, that's a good problem to have. But you do need to be compliant in 40 out of 50 of those states.
So fundraising registration, as you mentioned, this is something that needs to be done right up front, yes?
It depends. It depends on the nature of the nature of the fundraising, and the amount that you're raising, and the way that you're raising it. Some organizations couldn't afford to do that at the outset, and so rather than folding and just not starting anything because, well, we can't afford to do everything all at once, we help them step their way into that based on where they're getting traction and where they're raising money. And every state's got a different procedure. Some states say, if you raise money in our state, file within 90 days. Other states say, don't even have a donate button, or like New York. But every organization has a donate button. Most of them are not registered in New York, and most of them are your local cat rescue in your neighborhood is not going to go register with the state of New York, no matter what you do and what kind of laws there are. It's simply cost prohibitive for many of these organizations that are very, very small, and their exposure is so low that it's something to be considered, in our opinion, commensurate, even though it's required. And I wouldn't advise that somebody not do it if they believe that they are required to. However, it's simply not practical for the very small organizations. So we help them step into that.
So it's a process of growth and keeping all of the most important things front and center as far as compliance goes. And you did mention a number of entities actually lost their status. And so one has to be careful. And one of the revenue streams that we talk about is mission-based revenue, where they're actually providing services for people doing what they do at a commercial rate. How many organizations have you seen that kind of got tangled up differentiating mission-based revenue from unrelated revenue, and have they actually lost their status as a result?
I haven't really seen any organizations lose their status, but what happens typically is they'll get letters about that. If you're So Russell mentioned something called unrelated revenue versus related revenue. And
The phone's coming through the sound here.
that's not my my line, I don't believe.
Is your phone ringing?
Mine isn't.
Well,
Really loud.
that go away. So unrelated revenue is something that's absolutely not related to your mission. For example, if a church has a coffee shop, which most big churches do, where they sell coffee versus just giving it for free, or a bookstore, that is unrelated revenue. That is essentially a profit-producing arm or effort inside their entity. And that is unrelated revenue. If your unrelated revenue becomes too big for 501c3's activities for revenue generation, you'll end up paying a tax on it. They won't necessarily revoke your status, but you'll have to pay tax on unrelated revenue. Related revenue is if that same church is selling books, but not through the bookstore. They are selling books for a marriage course, and people are paying money to take that marriage course. And you pay $44. That covers about $20 worth of book fees and $25 to sit in the room and air condition it and do all the other things. Those are examples of related revenue, which are in line with the mission, and they're not swag or T-shirts or something completely unrelated. And that won't be taxed and generally is not a problem. Many organizations, a huge percentage of organizations exist entirely off of fee for service, because they're out there, maybe they're helping felons to rehabilitate. And so there's a fee to join, to go to those classes or something. That might be their entire revenue stream is fees for classes, but they're at a cut rate. They're for a specific type of community, and the purpose of that is to better those people's lives. It's an exempt activity. It's a fee for service, so that is related revenue.
So everything goes on a case-by-case basis, but it's something, it's part of that mix that should at least be considered, I think, as part of the growth plan.
Absolutely. And some organizations start little profit centers here and there that may not be completely related to build funds or to do a capital campaign. Something that comes to mind is I've seen organizations that fix used cars up for single moms, hopefully single dads too. Well, they might do some paid for repairs on the side where the mechanics donate their time, customers paying $60 instead of $120 an hour for that mechanic work. And that's generating hard cash to go into the ministry or the organization. And those are great kind of very business type hybrid organizations that are smart, and they're doing whatever it takes to serve that community, which I think is wonderful.
That brings Christian Brothers to mind. You've probably seen some of those around here locally. They are very conscientious. I met some of those guys. They do some similar work.
Absolutely.
So Christian, when somebody
Are you starting to see an increase or a decrease in the number of applications coming through?
It seems pretty steady right now. I think it's at about 60,000 per year. There was a high of 84,000, and I think it was 2013, 2014 maybe. But since then it's stabilized to about 60,000. I think there are about 1 million organizations in the country at this point.
So should somebody already have their board members chosen when they start this process?
He was good. He froze on us there for a second. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Anyway, yeah.
Now I can.
Okay.
Now we can.
Do people have their board members in mind when they start?
Uh-oh. Now we can.
We've lost you again. The last data book I looked at was like 2014 to 2015, and they had the number of entities that were opening I haven't seen the recent stat on the closure rate. Have you seen one?
I haven't. All I know is that the the number of organizations is building year over year. So it's probably like the small business cycle. You have a certain number, 1.1 or 2 million opening every year, and maybe maybe half of them don't make it. I don't know what the stat is in nonprofits, but there is a building, growing number of organizations year over year.
I think either one is substantial. Can you hear me? I changed mics.
Oh,
Yes.
Okay. It was a problem with my Yeti Monster. So I find that it's consistently difficult for people to get those initial 3 board members. Do you have any tips for how they should ask for it and get, because that's what takes time, is finding the people to put on the application.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, again, they can go to instantnonprofit.com, click resources at the top of the page, and get a board recruitment form so that it can be easier for them to propose to that person and be all ready when that person says, yeah, I would consider that. What's involved? And they can just slide a 1-pager asking that person for their commitment. Most people, I think, make this more complicated than it needs to be in board recruitment. You're recruiting initially, your founding board is going to be friends or family. They do not need to be an expert in any capacity that you need necessarily. They don't need to know how to do books, or they just need to trust you and be able to ask you questions that will help bolster and maybe find any blind spots in your overall high-level activities. There are 3 jobs really, are to show up for 1 board meeting per year at minimum for small organizations that don't have a ton going on, to review the budget at a high level, and then to review the activities at a high level. If they can do those 3 things, then they are a suitable board member. And your founding board will look very different than the board of a very evolved organization that has grown in its capacity and scope over time. So instead of putting big roadblocks, I need to go get somebody important, or I need to go get somebody with money, or putting these additional burdens on yourself, go get 2 friends who trust you and believe in the mission, and go from there. From there, once you have an entity, it's much easier to ask people to get involved with something that's real than something that is a concept. People struggle with concepts. But if you say, I have a nonprofit, I'm incorporating it now, I signed up with instantnonprofit.com because I'm a smart person, and I need you to sit on the board, here's what that is. That's the best way to go. You can always add more board members later. You need to have an odd number, minimum of 3.
What's that about odd number?
You need an odd number of board members. You need a minimum of 3, and the odd number is so that you don't have a voting deadlock. The IRS doesn't want to imagine an organization 2 that resolved, because there are no shareholders to rescue a nonprofit. It's entirely governed by the board.
Russell, that broke up on my computer, the whole thing about odd.
Well, having an odd number of people on the board so you don't end up with deadlock. And I philosophically, you want people to really be on the same page. But from a compliance standpoint, having an odd number of people makes that impossible. You certainly don't want to have a 4-3 or 5-4 type of thing going on with something you're making a decision on doing. You'd love to have a lot more buy-in than that to be effective. I think if you're in a position where you're having these kind of close votes, that could be very problematic, especially over the long term.
I think that's a indication that you got the wrong board. We teach that we build consensus in, so that if you got a deciding vote, that means you're making the deciding vote, or one person is swaying either way. So, there's a better way to approach that in building consensus in the decision making. And if we're that close on the vote, maybe we shouldn't vote on it, because you've got people divided on an issue. And that's, we do have nonprofits that have conflict, And we want to try to build in some synergy and decision making as we do that. So we're at the end of our time together, and I want to make sure that we give people that link again, Christian, so they can go and check out all this really helpful stuff that you've created. But I'm going to give a sponsor message, but before I do that, I want you to think about what is a tip that you'd like to leave people with when they finish this really helpful interview. Wow, this has been, people struggle with this kind of information, and I think I wanted to have you on here today so people that want a nonprofit could realize, no, it's not as hard as you're trying to make it. And so we want you to have the last word and give people a parting thought or a tip or a challenge. What do you want to leave people with? But this session is sponsored by EZ Card, and there if you're watching this on video, and you can see it on the website nonprofitexchange.com, you can see the EZ Card stuff there. And if you text, this says share or save the ZC card. And if you text 64600 with your cell phone, send a text to a number 64600, and for the message you put in the letters LD and R, and then you'll get this EZ card, and you've got Center Vision Leadership Foundation in your hand. You've got all the resources available: the Center Vision Community, the Nonprofit Performance 360 magazine, the Nonprofit Exchange. After today, you'll have the video with this interview in there. So this is an option to a website. It's not an app, but it's a digital card. So if you'll go to send a text to 64600, put in the word LDR, you'll get your own EZ card. An EZ card is a sponsor that allows us to do programming like this for free for people. And you know what? This is a really good fundraising tool and an engagement tool for your board and your volunteers. So before we end our hour, Christian, what thought do you want to leave with people? And then Russell will close out this really wonderful interview. Thank you.
Thank you. And I am just texting LDR to 64600. And see what happens from there. The EZ card looks wonderful. What I would say is, don't complicate starting a nonprofit. Get in the way of exploring, at least, right? Starting a nonprofit. Things are on our heart, on our life. And often I speak with people and we have people on our email list who've been there 3, 4, 5 years thinking about things while the problem doesn't go away, the feral cat problem, or the literacy, or maybe they're in a dangerous neighborhood. They're going to be the ones to make it safer. And I often hear regret in the voices of people who say, I should have called you 3 years ago, but I was busy, and my car broke down, or I had an issue of some kind. This is something that you can start on a very simple basis. You can move forward as you're able, and you can learn by doing. I really suggest learning by doing. It's not terribly expensive at all with our system to start a 501c3. And what you can do is just get out there, get your message out, and you can have people rallying around something that exists rather than having an idea bouncing around in your head, which is very hard to get people to gauge people's support. I have been shocked at my career of raising millions of dollars from very small lists of people with a one-page memo initially and an idea. And the amount of outpouring of belief and checks that came in for some of these ideas that I've had, or some of the things that I've supported other people by fundraising for them was amazing. You will never know until you try. So try to keep it simple and get some expert help. Don't try to do your own plumbing, because you're going to end up with a basement full of stuff.
And Russell, I think as you're closing out, you can invite them to join the community. That's where they'll learn.
That's true, yes. So I'd like to thank you for coming by. It's good to see you again. There's a lot of wealth of information here So the key is to get started. Go to instantnonprofit.com and get started, because you can do this in a systematic way without having to think about every little step, because the system is designed to take you step by step. Kristen and his team are there to help you through that. Sending out thanks, a shout out to our friends at Easy Card to thank them for supporting this broadcast, the Nonprofit Exchange. We are here every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time with geniuses like Christian and other phenomenal business leaders, people with other products and services to help you stay on top of your game to deliver the impact that you're delivering. If you can't be here at that time, there's nothing to worry about. You can subscribe to the Nonprofit Exchange on iTunes or Stitcher so that you can listen to these broadcasts on the go and build a library of just phenomenal information on running your nonprofit and getting better and growing your team. So thanks again, Christian, for coming here. I'd like to thank all of you difference makers out there who are out here in the public making things better for others out there. Until next week, this is Russ and Hugh signing off, and we look forward to seeing you on the next edition of the Nonprofit Exchange.